UFC Fight Night, Whittaker versus Aliskerov, full card predictions. Starting at the bottom of the card, making my way to the top as always. First fight of the night we have is Long Zhao versus Chang Ho Lee. In this one, I'm going with Long Zhao. Both guys have been outgrappled at points in their previous few fights. However, the pace of some of the Long Zhao fights are pretty extreme, heavy grappling, as well as a lot of striking as well. So very heavy pace. He has a majority decision and a split decision, but those are against somewhat decent opponents. I feel like Cheng Ho Lee's had a pretty easy run so far. He's 9-1. The best opponent he fought Rana Singh, who isn't very good, isn't really a grappler whatsoever. He took him down, got on top, and finished him in round one. I know he's 11-1, but I don't think that's a super impressive win. And then even the last win he had against his now 9-1 opponent, decent win, but um, I don't think he's going to be able to get on top of Long Zhao and just ground and pound him like he did his last few opponents. I think Long Zhao is going to possess a little bit more grappling threat, even though Long Zhao did find himself in some bad grappling positions in his previous few fights. He has more experience. He's a younger guy at 26 years old, 26 versus 30, with more MMA, a lot more MMA experience. He is a dog. He will fight. Um, Over 3 rounds, he will fight very hard. So I do think both guys seem, at least in their previous fights, seem to have some grappling liability. Both guys are not the best grapplers in the world, but I don't think either one's going to have a huge, like tremendous grappling success over the other guy. For that reason, I'll favor the younger guy in Long Zhao over Chang Ho Lee. The experience edge, the fact that I think he probably can throw just as much volume on the feet. I know he lost to Christian Quinones, but overall he's fought the better competition as well. So I got to go with Long Zhao to get it done here. Second fight of the night, Magomed Gadji Yasuov versus Brenson Ribeiro. Initially, I wanted to pick Brenson Ribeiro, and I still understand that it could realistically go to Brenson Ribeiro early. I mean, he can find a round one finish potentially, because I don't think Magomed's anything super special. However, the one thing I don't like is the fact that Brenson Ribeiro, although being a super heavy hitter, although being someone that can obviously knock opponents out early, he also can get knocked out. All of his losses pretty much come by way of knockout. For the most part, 3 losses by knockout. I mean, especially as of recent, I should say. As of recent, Ming Yang Zhang knocked him out. And then if you look in 2022, he got knocked out twice in a row, both in the first round. And even in his decision equity, he has one fight that went the distance that he lost. So it's not like I see him winning over 3 rounds here over Magomed. Magomed's a guy with relatively decent cardio. As far as I know, Jose Medina was basically a punching bag on the Contender Series. I don't really rate that win super highly, or even the fight before that was against Muhammad Said Malam. I watched that fight. He got rocked in round two, but he utilized good enough movement and wrestling. On the feet, he moved around a lot, tried not to get hit, and then he obviously out wrestled that opponent, Muhammad. I think Magomed probably could do something similar here. I don't think Brenson Ribeiro is really a great grappler. I know he's got, a few submissions on his record. I don't really necessarily see him submitting Magomed Gaziaslov. I think Gaziaslov has way more decision equity. Um, Also, if he lands a big shot in the first round or even throughout the fight, I think Bretson Ribeiro is super hittable. So I'm not like extremely confident on this one. Magomed's 30 years old to the 27-year-old Brenson. Brenson has the experience edge. He also has fought the better competition, which is probably one of the reasons why he's been knocked out a few times. But I just think he keeps his chin up in the air way too often. His fights are very sloppy. The Jao Fagundes fight, where is that? Right here. I wrote down that I just thought that fight was super sloppy. When I was watching it, I thought that he was jumping for guillotines, didn't get some of them, and then he would try to scramble up. Like, he eventually won the fight with ground and pound, but it's like, he got rocked in that fight as well. He's been rocked and knocked out in a few different fights. I feel like a knockout for Magomed isn't necessarily like the craziest thing. And over three rounds, I have to favor Magomed as well. He's better defensively. He should be good enough to be able to take down Brenson. Even if he can't hold him down for 3 rounds, he should be able to mix in wrestling. So I get why Magomed's the favorite. I don't know if he should be like minus 330, but I do get why he is the favorite in this one, and I'm going to take him to win. Next up, Muin Gafurov versus Kyung Ho Kang. I'm actually going to go with Kyung Ho Kang here slightly. He is the underdog, but I'm not. I get it if it goes 3 rounds. Maybe the judges give it to Muin Gafurov here in Saudi Arabia. But Muin Gafurov hasn't really shown me anything in the UFC. He has 0 UFC wins. He's 0-2, and if you count the Contender Series, he even lost that fight against Chad Anheliger. And by the way, he was rocked in the fight against Chad, rocked and dropped in the fight against Chad. So he was hurt in that fight. He was hurt in the John Castaneda fight with a head kick. I know Castaneda's got some sneaky head kicks, but he was hurt against Castaneda. And then he was submitted in round 1 against Said Nurmagomedov when he shot a poor takedown and got his neck snatched up in a guillotine in the first minute. For Muin Gafurov, he does throw some wild kicks. He'll throw some spinning stuff. He does have a decent enough kicking game to keep guys guessing, but I don't think his striking is amazing. He'll throw some winging hooks. He does throw hard. He's got some decent overhands. He has knocked fighters out with overhand rights. And like I said, he does throw some winging hooks with all of his power. He doesn't really set a lot of things up. He just kind of throws full power, singular shots. One thing I do like from Gafurov is he does have pretty solid pressure on the feet. He will try to walk guys down and land on them, throw some decent volume. But on the Kang side, he does have a lot of submissions on his record. If you look through Kyung Ho Kang's record, obviously he has 12 submission wins. So I do think if Muin Gafurov, he probably will attempt to wrestle here. And if he does shoot some sloppy takedowns, Kyung Ho Kang could jump on the neck. I do think that's a slight possibility. Even, Muin Gafurov, I just feel like isn't. I just don't know if he's UFC caliber or not. I mean, losing to Chad Anheliger, I get it. Chad's not the worst fighter in the world. And John Castaneda and especially Said Nurmagomedov's really good. But John Castaneda, not super impressed with losing all of those fights. On the regional scene, I get it. He's had some regional wins, but I think Kyung Ho Kang, he's got some solid power. He has 4 knockdowns in his last 7 fights for Kyung Ho Kang, so he's definitely dropping a lot of opponents. He has the power to hurt Muin Gafurov. Gafurov's been rocked and hurt on numerous occasions. Now, I'm not saying Kyung Ho Kang can't get hurt, but I definitely think Muin Gafurov could get hurt here. So, yeah, I am going to go with Kyung Ho Kang. I feel like he likely has more finishing upside just in terms of, he has a decent enough grappling game. I know he got out-grappled by Ronnie Yaya, but Ronnie Yaya is a really good grappler. I know it's not a great loss to have on his record, and that was relatively recently. That was 2.5 years ago he lost to Ronnie Yaya, but it's Ronnie Yaya is a much better grappler than Muin Gafurov. I don't think Muin Gafurov has excellent control, so he could try and mix in the wrestling, but I don't think he's going to be able to just hold down Kyung Ho Kang or land a lot of effective ground and pound. At least that's what I think. So I'll roll the dice here with the underdog in Kyung Ho Kang. Next fight is Renat Fakhretdinov versus Nicholas Dalby. When I first saw the fight, I understand why people are, some people are considering an underdog pick on Dalby, but upon more research, I think that Renat's the side here. Obviously, Dalby has good cardio. He won't give up on himself. In round 3, usually that's his best round, or as the fight goes on, he can turn it up, as he did against Gabriel Bonfim. I believe that was actually a round 2 win, but regardless, he turned it up on Gabriel Bonfim after Bonfim was winning early and ended up defeating Bonfim in that fight. But the difference with Renat is I think Renat has every single ability to take Nicholas Dalby down and control him on the mat. As I said, we've seen many guys rack up control time on Nicholas Dalby. Tim Means had over 8 minutes of control time. Claudio Silva had 7 minutes of control time. Gabriel Bonfim, before he lost, had over 4 minutes of control time on Nicholas Dalby. And I do think if guys like Tim Means and Claudio Silva are controlling you, especially Tim Means is getting you down and controlling you for 8 minutes, I think Renat Fakhretdinov can do something similar. I think Renat has a clear wrestling upside here. I think he's the far better wrestler. I don't see him making the same mistake as Alessio Zaleski, or in that Alessio Zaleski fight. In that Zaleski Dos Santos fight, Renat obviously got tired and the fight went to a draw. I know Dalby could turn it on late, but I just think Renat's going to be able to get the takedowns throughout the entire fight. Renat has some solid wins on his record. The Brian Battle win is aging very well. And if he can beat Brian Battle, I see no reason why he can't beat someone like Nicholas Dalby as well. So maybe Dalby Homer Simpsons his way into the third round and Renat beats on him and then he somehow comes back. But I can't predict that to happen. I can't predict him to just get beat up and somehow survive the onslaught and beat Renat in round 3. Because I know Renat should have good enough cardio, even as the rounds go on, to out wrestle a guy like Nicholas Dalby. And even early, one thing I didn't mention is even early, Renat's got some power. He hurt Alessio Zaleski Dos Santos early. Before he submitted Kevin Lee, he dropped him. He dropped him and hurt him badly. And even Brian Battle, he rocked Brian Battle on multiple occasions. So if you're hurting all those guys and you're using your hands to set up your wrestling, I think that's a good idea for Renat. I think he has good straight punches. I think he's fast to the target. And I think he'll be able to beat Nicholas Dalby over 3 rounds. Next prelim is Mohamed Naimov versus Felipe Lima. Short notice fight here for Felipe Lima. Naimov's had a full camp for this. I do actually like the game of Lima. I think he's quite good. Although I think the line is getting a little bit absurd here. Look, I get it. Felipe Lima should not be a big underdog. I think he opened as like a +2 something. I don't think he should be that big of an underdog. I think the line should be close. But I don't think Naimov should be like, an underdog in this fight, really. I think the line, at best, it should be a pick'em, which I believe on most sports books it is a pick'em now. But I don't know why it's saying +100 here. But I just think Naimov, I like I said, I think Lima has a very good overall game, especially the last fight I watched him in, the Jonas Magard fight. He looked pretty solid there. And I definitely think that Lima is a very talented fighter. He's training out of All Stars Gym in Sweden, which is obviously a gym that a lot of prospects come out of. So the only concern, like if he wasn't taking this on short notice, I might even consider picking him to win. But there's a few reasons why I have to favor Naimov here. The first is Felipe Lima's taking this on short notice. The second is Lima's a 35er. Whereas Naimov's a 45er who honestly who's a pretty big guy, to be honest. I think Naimov will have the size advantage. I think he'll just be the naturally bigger guy. Lima's normally a bantamweight, and that's where he should be competing at. Whereas Naimov, he fought his first fight in the UFC against Jamie Malarkey on short notice, and he knocked him out, which just goes to show that Naimov's not a small guy. If he hits you and he can hurt you. Not that Naimov's a really good striker, but he did take the Malarkey fight on short notice and finished him. And then he beat Nathaniel Wood. I won't talk much about the Eric Silva fight because Eric Silva got injured right away. But the Nathaniel Wood fight, Nathaniel Wood is a pretty good fighter. He's very experienced in the UFC, and Nathaniel Wood's another guy who's very good, but he's a 35er. He shouldn't be at 45. He's undersized. And Muhammad Naimov basically took advantage of Nathaniel Wood just being too small for the weight class. He kind of bullied him a little bit in the wrestling. He was able to out wrestle, out grapple him, just be like the stronger guy. And I feel like something similar can happen here. Just Muhammad Naimov being the stronger guy against Felipe Lima. The short notice, I just feel like will be a disadvantage for Lima. One thing I want to note is Naimov is pretty notoriously a bad gasser as the fight goes on. He seems to tire out a lot in round three, and that's when his opponents have the most success. Even Nathaniel Wood was having a lot of success in round three, as well as a lot of his opponents can rack up some success when he gets tired. And Naimov, although he has looked pretty bad, even in the Contender Series fight, where was that against Colin Anglin, and then he lost to Olivier Murat. Like he has some, not great losses on his record, but I think he's improved a lot since then. I think he's improved a lot. He's probably juicing. If I had to guess, I would say there's a very likely chance that he's on some sort of steroids or something. Um, and then as far as Naimov as well, was looking at his Instagram, and he was training with an Olympic wrestling gold medalist in Zarbek Sidikov. I might be butchering the name, but he's training with an a gold medalist in wrestling, which makes me think that he's going to implement a lot of wrestling here. He probably will wrestle heavy. That was most likely his initial game plan from the start. He was in training camp with an Olympic wrestler, and I saw he was on the wrestling mats a lot. So more than likely, Muhammad Naimov he should be able to out wrestle Felipe Lima, the smaller guy. I've seen Lima taken down by Jonas Magard, even though he wasn't held down. He was taken down, and that was at 35. I think at 45, Naimov will be able to out wrestle Felipe Lima. Although Lima has a bright future, I want to say that he's 12-1. He's a very good fighter, 26 years old. I think in the proper weight class and not on short notice, Felipe Lima can give a lot of guys trouble and be a very good prospect. But I think personally it's a little bit too much to ask for, traveling all the way to Saudi Arabia, fighting a guy in Naimov who likely the crowd will be on his side. I got to go with Muhammad Naimov. Headliner of the prelims now, we have Nasrat Haqparast taking on Jared Flash Gordon. I'm going with Nasrat Haqparast here. His last fight for Nasrat, he finished Jamie Malarkey in under 2 minutes. The one before that, he had a relatively competitive fight, but he beat Landon Quinones. So fairly competitive fight. It wasn't like he completely dominated, but he did win the fight 30-27 on all cards. Nasrat, I feel like what Nasrat seems to do often is he seems to beat everyone that's not really top 15 caliber or who isn't like someone that's super dynamic. Case in point, he's 16-5 overall, 8-4 in the UFC. If you look, I won't look all the way to 2017, but if you look at in the last few years, all of his recent fights, Bobby Green, Dan Hooker, and Drew Dober, those are his 3 losses in the UFC. And I don't really necessarily think those are bad losses, to be quite honest. I don't think those are bad losses. Dober, Green, and Hooker. Dober was top 15 for a while. Bobby Green at the time. This was when Bobby Green. What year did Bobby Green and him fight in? That was in 2022, so it wasn't super long ago. And then Dan Hooker was 2021. But if you look at those fights, those 3 guys are all like top 15 level guys. Jared Gordon, I know Jared Gordon was looking fairly good against Bobby Green early, but you can't really take that much away from that fight. It was only the first round, and it was super back and forth, but it wasn't like Gordon was like dominating. It was a close fight. I don't think Gordon is a super dynamic striker by any means. I think he's decent enough technically, but like I said, I don't think he's super dynamic. One thing about Jared Gordon I do like is he is 11-1 in fights that go the distance. So he wins a lot of fights that do go to decision. So that is a bit of a concern on the Haqparast side. Like if this fight goes all 3, maybe Gordon can get the decision win. However, um, Gordon has been KO'd, TKO'd in multiple fights. On his record overall, I believe he has four. He has four KO, TKO losses. Technically, he also got KO'd by Bobby. I know it was a clash of heads, but it was still a knockout. Like, I know it wasn't an official knockout. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, like, it's not good for your chin to get knocked out with a headbutt, and that wasn't like super long ago. Like, so he's been, put unconscious multiple times, or at least, KO, TKO'd multiple times, I should say. So I don't like that for Jared Gordon. He's 35 years old to the 25 or 28-year-old, excuse me, 28-year-old Nasrat Haqparast. So Haqparast, he is a very experienced UFC fighter. He should be coming into his prime here at 28. This is basically the prime of his career. I know he's been fighting for a while, but in the prime of your career for Nasrat, you should be able to beat a guy like Jared Gordon, who I think he has a lot of, miles on the tank. I think he's fought in the UFC for just as long as Nasrat, but he's taken a lot more damage. Um, yeah, I definitely have to. I think it's going to be a mainly striking fight. I don't think Gordon or Nasrat effectively wrestle here. So I think on the feet, Nasrat's definitely the better striker. I think he's faster. I think technically he's good as well. Not that Gordon's good technically, but yeah, I have to favor Nasrat Haqparast to win. Also, with Jared Gordon, he has struggled against some southpaws in the past. Nasrat Haqparast is a southpaw, and he struggled against some of them. For instance, the Joaquin Silva and Carlos Diego Ferreira both knocked him out. Joaquin Silva was around 3 knockout. CDF was around 1 knockout. Those are both southpaws. I think Nasrat, also being a southpaw, could give him Gordon a bit of trouble there. So I will go with Nasrat Haqparast to get this one done. Now we move along to the main card, starting with Johnny Walker versus Volkan No Time Ozdemir. It's a pretty interesting fight. I think it's a pretty binary fight as well. Walker obviously has the metrics advantage here, but he doesn't really use a lot of those metrics. He's got the reach, he's got the size, but I just feel like he doesn't really know how to use it. He's not a guy that really, uses a lot of his advantages. And I think Volkan Ozdemir is a pretty good, fighter over 3 as far as, he's a pretty standard type of striker. I think if the fight plays out on the feet over 3 rounds, barring a crazy knockout, which is possible with Johnny Walker, a knockout's certainly possible, but barring a huge knockout for Walker, I think Volkan Ozdemir is the better minute winner than Walker. I think Walker does a lot of crazy stuff. A lot of his stuff is crazy movements. He'll throw flying knees, a lot of spinning stuff. He's just a wild, wild fighter. Volkan is much better technically. He's a much cleaner fighter overall. He wasn't looking bad against Yuri until he obviously got KO'd, which is also a bit of a concern here that he might get KO'd, but it's not one I'm confident in, I'll be honest. I'm picking Volkan just because I think he's also the smarter fighter. I think in terms of fight IQ, Johnny Walker doesn't have very good fight IQ, and Volkan does have better fight IQ. And another thing about Volkan versus Johnny Walker is the chin of Walker isn't very good. Volkan's been knocked out before, but Johnny Walker, I feel like, has a worse chin. I feel like Johnny Walker's chin is always a liability in every single fight he's in. So I can't trust in Johnny Walker's chin. I can't trust in his fight IQ. Unless Johnny Walker's a big underdog, or something, you want to take a shot on him. At pick'em odds, again, not super confident in either guy, to be honest. I could see both guys winning. I could see Walker knocking out Volkan or catching him with something, or I could also see Volkan just being the smarter guy, being the more technical minute winner here. So yeah, I do think the line's accurate, but I will go with Volkan Ozdemir to get this one done. Won't spend too much time on this one here. We have Sharabulat Magomedov versus Antonio Tricoli. I'm going with Shara Magomedov. Sharabulat is being fed a can. maybe not a complete can, but I don't think Antonio Tricoli's got anything for him. Tricoli's last fight was over 2.5 years ago. I know he can grapple a little bit, and that's the concern here because Sharamagomedov isn't really a superb grappler by any stretch. But despite Sharamagomedov not being a good grappler, and I get it, if the fight hits the mat, he'll probably have a disadvantage here. But Tricoli hasn't fought in over 2.5 years, as I said, and he's fought twice in the last 5 years. So fighting twice in the last 5 years, I don't really like that for him. He hasn't fought a lot recently whatsoever. I think Sharamagomedov is definitely not being brought in here to lose. I hate to say that, oh, that's who the UFC wants to win, because it doesn't always happen that way. We saw with Jekka Seregi versus Weston Wilson and we've seen it with Angelo Jubilee and Mike Breeden. We've seen it multiple times. The UFC doesn't always get what they want, but I think here it's there's a reason that Sharamagomedov was fighting Jolton Luderbach, who was a much smaller guy, a guy who was formerly at 155 and was going to fight at middleweight. I think Tricoli here is being brought in to lose to Sharamagomedov. I think if the fight stays on the feet for an extended period of time, Magomedov picks him apart. I think Magomedov is actually a very good kickboxer. And I will predict that the fight stays on the feet and Sharamagomedov gets it done, probably by knockout. Another thing to mention, apparently this guy's playing like a movie villain as well, which is interesting. I just don't see the UFC trying to give this guy a fight that they think he's going to lose. I think it's Sharamagomedov all the way. Next fight, this is the featured fight of the night. We have KG Kelvin Gastelum versus D-Rod Daniel Rodriguez. I don't want to pick, I have no, respect. Kelvin Gastelum, it really just annoys me what he's done. The fight was scheduled for 170. What does Gastelum do? He says, I can't make the weight on fight week. I can't make the weight because he's too busy eating a bunch of bullshit. So KG, of course, Kelvin Gastelum can't make the weight. So he's fighting D-Rod at 185. I'm actually picking D-Rod just because I think Gastelum's a fat sack of shit. And I know it sounds like I'm being disrespectful and everything, but it's dude, you signed up for a fight at 170. You just lost you got dominated by Sean Brady, embarrassed. You come back and you miss weight and you say, oh, I can't fight at 170. I need to fight at 185. You had plenty of time to make the weight. Doing that to D-Rod, I understand some people didn't like the Li Jingliang decision. And I think personally, Li Jingliang could have won that fight. But it's you can't blame D-Rod for the decision. You know what I mean? I don't think D-Rod won that personally, but it was a competitive enough fight where I don't think it's the worst robbery or anything like that. I think it's a close fight. And for D-Rod, he did what he had to do. In the Li Jingliang fight, it was a super short notice fight for both guys. It is what it is. It is what it is. Against Kelvin Gastelum, where's his motivation at? Gastelum, he got dominated by Sean Brady. Now he's coming back here fighting at 185 after saying he was going to fight at 170. He beat Chris Curtis. Honestly, I didn't think he looked great in that fight. Some people thought he did look good. I'm like, how? Chris Curtis usually doesn't look good. Usually Chris Curtis takes some time to warm up, takes some time to get going. And I think Curtis is relatively comparable to D-Rod, so I get why some people, would pick Gastelum here. But I think Curtis actually, there was a headbutt in that fight. I just think Curtis was, if that fight played out a little bit differently, Curtis could have won the fight. Gastelum before that, he had the Jared Cannonier loss, the Robert Whittaker 50-45 domination, beat Ian Heinich multiple years ago. I just think Kelvin Gastelum, I know he's the younger guy. He's 32 years old. Most people, 76% of people are picking Gastelum. I just have to question the motivation. I have to question why he's here. Kelvin could look to wrestle. I could see that potentially. But if he tries to wrestle and can't get the wrestling going and it's a striking fight, I think a striking fight's actually fairly competitive against D-Rod and Gastelum. I think D-Rod's a pretty good striker. Sure, he could be washed up. He got knocked out by Ian Gary, got finished by Neil Magny via submission. Like, I get it. D-Rod it could be like Father Time gets the best of everybody. D-Rod's 37. He could just look way washed up, way past his prime. But one thing about D-Rod is that I saw was he's training out of Extreme Couture now. Extreme Couture being one of the best gyms in the sport. We just saw yesterday Alex Polisi beat Antonio Carlos Jr. I don't know why I brought that fight up. I really don't. But we just saw like guys like Extreme Couture as underdogs can perform very well. We've seen it multiple times in the past. We've seen Extreme Couture underdogs can get it done just by being, guys that are making good improvements, guys that are training with really good fighters. I think D-Rod's he's in the gym with guys like Chris Curtis, who I know Kelvin Gastelum beat, but Chris Curtis is the perfect guy to get advice from when you're fighting Kelvin Gastelum. I'm sure Curtis is giving all the advice to D-Rod, telling him how he can win. And I think for D-Rod, for Daniel Rodriguez, this is a fight where it's win or go home. So he's putting all of his eggs into one basket here. He's training as hard as he can. I think he's taking this more seriously than Gastelum. And I get that Gastelum could probably be the overall better fighter in terms of skill, but I'm just not picking a guy that completely, missed weight or, chose to weigh in at 185, chose to not oblige what he should have done on his contract. I just don't like that. So I'm going to pick D-Rod to get this one done as an underdog. Next fight is the co-main event. We have Sergey Pavlovich versus Alexander Volkov. I want to pick Volkov here, actually, because I do think Volkov, honestly, I think Volkov could be the better fighter here. The problem is Volkov, I think he's going to get chinned at some point in this fight, which I hate to predict, like, he's just going to get knocked out, like, because I do think Volkov, honestly, could win the fight if he doesn't get knocked out, but that's a big if. Volkov's skilled. He can use his length to his advantage, throw, teeps up the middle. Very long guy, but he actually doesn't have a reach advantage. 84-inch reach, super long arms for Pavlovich versus only 80-inch of reach for Volkov. So Pavlovich will have the bigger reach here, slight by 4 inches, which is a pretty significant margin in terms of Volkov being the taller guy, but Pavlovich being the guy with longer reach. Pavlovich lost his debut against Alistair Overeem, but other than that, he's won every single fight, besides the Aspinall fight, of course. Aspinall defeated him in the first round. But Aspinall defeated Volkov in the first round as well, and that was a pretty shitty look for Volkov in terms of he got taken down and he got straight arm locked or straight arm barred, and that was not a look that it wasn't a good look really whatsoever. I know it's Tom Aspinall, he's really good, but it's just not the look you want to have, getting submitted like that in round one. Basically a bully type of, it really was a bully type of submission. I think Volkov is the less physical guy here. I think Pavlovich definitely is more physical. Both guys have trained together, and apparently from the training, from what everyone says or what Volkov says in his own words, Pavlovich got the better of him. Pavlovich hit him hard and hurt him. Maybe he's just Maybe he's just saying that to get the people, maybe he's just saying that just to say it. I wouldn't be super shocked, but I think Pavlovich probably gets this one done. He's a few years younger, nothing crazy, 32 to 35. I just think Pavlovich, coming off a loss against Aspinall, this is a fight where he needs to get this one done to stay in the title picture. If he beats Alexander Volkov, he's right back in the title hunt. If he beats Volkov, he maybe is one more win away from a title shot. So maybe they even run it back with Aspinall if Pavlovich can get a win here against Volkov. Well, I don't think that'll happen, but you never know. If he can get an impressive win against Volkov, Pavlovich throws himself right back in there. I do think it's hard to trust Volkov just because he's been cracked on the chin before. He's not the greatest defensively. I know he's not awful defensively. Like, he's a good enough striker, but I just think in 4-ounce gloves, if you're getting hit by Sergey Pavlovich, you're probably going to get knocked out. So I'm gonna take Pavlovich to win. I think minus 245. It's a little bit like, I mean, a lot of the win equity, most of the win equity for Pavlovich typically is by knockout. So laying minus 245 against a guy like Volkov, I'm not really interested, but I will pick him to win the fight overall. I just think Volkov, it's just too hard to trust him um, in a fight against a guy with massive power in Pavlovich. Lastly, we had the main event of the evening, which was supposed to be Whittaker and Chimaev, which is now Whittaker versus Ikram Aliskerov. I'm actually going to go with Ikram here. I'm going to go with Ikram Aliskerov to beat Robert Whittaker. Look, I get it. I get Robert Whittaker has fought the much better guys. I know he's fought the much better guys. I just don't see this as being I just don't think this is an Abus Magomedov situation. I really don't. I mean, I get it. I know it's short notice. I know Ikram's taking the fight across the world on like a week and a half or however long notice. It's very short notice. I get all that. But I just don't see it being an Abus Magomedov and Sean Strickland situation. I think that situation was a little bit different. I don't think Ikram Aliskerov's a quitter. Whereas Abus, obviously, he gave up after one round. I don't think Ikram's going to give up after one round. He's been training with Team Habib. Um, he's been training in Dagestan as well as getting some training at American Top Team. He's been training with some really good guys. Obviously, like I said, ATT as well as Team Habib. So he's been training with some of the best in the world. Ikram has. I think he's been making a lot of improvements. And one of the reasons why I think Ikram can get it done here is look at some of the recent fights Whittaker's been in. The Paulo Costa fight, I know he beat Costa in rounds 2 and 3, but in round 1 he got rocked bad with a spinning wheel kick from Costa. Costa had him hurt bad, but he didn't really follow up with anything, and he didn't throw enough volume to really beat Whittaker. I think, if he threw more, he was hurting Whittaker, and he probably could have made something happen there, but just didn't do what he was supposed to do. The fight IQ of Costa was lacking clearly. The fight against Dricus du Plessis, I know Dricus is the champion, but that was a bad look for Whittaker. He got embarrassed. He got completely dominated from pillar to post. Didn't have any success in that fight really at all. Dricus dropped him. He hurt him. He took him down with a head and arm throw. Took Whittaker down with a head and arm throw. Nearly submitted him, honestly. If there was more time on the clock, he might have actually went for a Darce there. I just think for Whittaker, he is very good, but he's been hurt in so many fights before. He battered Vettori, but that's Vettori. Israel Adesanya, he was even hurt in round 1 of that fight. And then the first fight with Adesanya, he obviously got hurt in round 1, knocked out in round 2. The second fight against Whittaker, it was a close fight, but he got hurt in round 1. I just think early on, Ikram has a lot of finishing potential. And Whittaker gets hurt every single fight in round 1. I think it's just a matter of time before he gets finished. I know he got finished against du Plessis. I think it's a matter of time before someone puts his lights out or seriously, TKOs, even KOs him in round 1 or 2. And I think that's very, very live here against Ikram Aliskerov. I know that Whittaker, he's been 5 rounds before with the elite, which is why he's the favorite on the line here. But you got to question someone like Robert Whittaker, someone that's fought all the best guys in the world, being a minus 160, whereas Ikram's plus 130. I feel like someone knows something here. I just think Ikram Aliskerov's the side. Ikram, I know he's fought Phil Hawes and Worley Alves. Those are his 2 UFC wins. So people are going to be like, oh, he's fought nobodies. He's fought chinny Phil Hawes and he knocked him out. And then he fought Worley Alves, who's past his prime. I get all that. I get he hasn't fought a great level of competition so far, but Ikram's just one of those guys where I think he's been making improvements. I think he's a fresher fighter. I think he's got more early finishing ability. If the fight goes late, if it gets into round 3, 4, 5, I think Whittaker's going to dominate. But I think early, Ikram's got a very live chance of winning. I think he's got a very live chance of winning early. Also, Ikram, I feel like he probably could get some takedowns here. I don't know if he's going to go for takedowns because I think he can get tired knowing that the fight's 5 rounds. So I can see him keeping this fight on the feet. But if he has to implement wrestling, we've seen Whittaker taken down before. We saw the Dricus fight where Dricus got on top of him and did some major damage, nearly submitted him as well. If Dricus can do it, I know Ikram's a good grappler. People point to the where is it? People point to the Nishan Burrell fight as like you know, as why Ikram isn't that good. But I'm like, Nishan Burrell, for those that don't know, he's training out of Philly with some of the like guys like Sean Brady and all of them. Like he's training out of that gym with that team, and he's a good fighter. Like he's at the very least, he's a good enough grappler. Like he's not a bad grappler. People are thinking that Ikram, can't wrestle that well or can't grapple because he couldn't, submit Nishan Burrell. It's like he took him down and beat him over 3 rounds. Just Burrell's a guy who's tough. He's not easy guy to finish. He's a guy that's very durable, and he's a guy that makes it tough for you to get him out of there. So I don't think that's really that bad on Ikram. He won the fight regardless. He's 15-1. His only loss in his entire career is a Hamzat Chimaev round 1 knockout, which he actually was stuffing the takedowns early before he got uppercut. He got uppercut and put away. That was a bad knockout, but that was like many, many, many years ago. I think he's gotten a lot better since then. And we need new blood. We need fresh blood in the division. If Ikram wins this fight, they'll probably throw him in there. Well, obviously Strickland deserves the next title fight after Dricus and Adesanya. So it'll probably go Dricus Duplessis versus Israel Adesanya. Winner fights Sean Strickland, and maybe Ikram gets in right after that. Maybe Ikram wins one more fight. Maybe he just if he finishes Whittaker, I think he'll get the next title shot. Honestly, I think he would be deserving just because Whittaker is at the top of the division. So I think this is a huge opportunity for Ikram. I think he's got all the how do I describe it? I think he's the one that's taking. I think Whittaker's taking it seriously, but I think Whittaker's motivation is not on the level of Ikram's here. I think Ikram's got all the motivation in the world. I think he really, really needs to win this fight to put himself on the next level and get to that title shot. So I'm going to be going with Ikram Aliskerov here. I know it's a bit of a question mark in terms of his cardio and all that stuff, but I really do think he can get this one done over Whittaker, especially early. And there we have it. UFC Fight Night Whittaker versus Aliskerov in Saudi Arabia. Late video. I know the card starts in about like 2 or 3 hours, so I'm going to try to get this video up right away. But as always, thank you guys very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.